make sure you knew what was at your desks that had been,
Right.
in addition to what was in your packets. There's a revised set of conditions for the upcoming project, and it's marked revised. There's some supplemental material regarding a just traffic study that we did that was omitted from your packets, as well as the initial study, and a revised Exhibit B, which we also have at your packets, which was the revised figures as to the costs and fees that were going to be attributed to the project. I just wanted to make sure that you had those in front of you and you knew what they were.
Oh. We'll check it out. Okay. Okay.
We're ready anytime, Chair.
Go. This is the Emeryville Village Retail Mixed-Use Project.
That's correct. This item has been brought before the City Council previously. At this time, it's PUD 99-1, and there's a series of actions which I'd like to itemize briefly before we begin so that the audience and the Commission can follow what we're attempting to do. The first action that we're going to be considering has to deal with the approval of a consideration of a mitigated negative declaration. The second item would be the consideration of an amendment to a preliminary development plan to incorporate housing to this plan unit development commercial district. That is a requirement. The third item that we're going to be acting on is a consideration of a final development plan to permit the retail and residential project at the site. The fourth item has to do with design review for the entire project. The fifth item has to deal with the review and design specifications for Emery Street. As you know, that street is not in, and we have to consider the improvements for that street. And the last thing has to deal with the determination of a conveyance of a former Emeryville fire station, which requires, by government code, the Planning Commission determine that it's consistent with the general plan in order that we complete that conveyance. So those are the actions that we're going to be actually addressing tonight under this permit. And if I can, I'll briefly summarize the project. It has to deal with, it's on the board, it has to deal with the former site that's bounded by Park Street, Emery Street to the west, 45th Street to the north, and San Pablo Avenue to the east. It's approximately a 5-acre site, and essentially that was the site that was formerly under the Kaiser Medical Center PUD. And as you know, when Kaiser abandoned its proposal, Pixar stepped in and has taken and developed the Pixar site, which is due west of this site. That left this 5-acre site as a remnant parcel, and we're doing the development on that. So that's kind of a very quick chronology in how we got to where we are with this one, with parcel. With regard to the mitigated negative declaration, we circulated it on February 5th, and we're leaving it open for public comment. This initial mitigated negative declaration was actually originally brought before the City Council in February and March of last year, when they actually considered the former Pegasus proposal, and that was formerly, currently known as a standard brand proposal. At that time, that proposal basically covered 18,000 square feet of new retail buildings and a renovation of about 15,000 for the standard brand. So that was a total retail area of about 33,000 square feet. It also entailed a conceptual approval for 70 to 90 units, residential units in the rear section, in essentially the same location is now being brought before you. So in essence, this is fundamentally the same concept in terms of the uses and the layout of the uses. The square footages have changed, but this proposal by the Castle Group is essentially the same as that was brought before by the Pegasus company. So I won't go into the background. I think I've just kind of covered it. But I will like to talk about the current planning process. To give you a little bit more background in terms of how we've gotten where we are today, we realize that the Planning Commission has not had an opportunity to look at this proposal, so we'll go into a little detail. When the former Pegasus proposal got its approval for this back in March of last year, they, for whatever reason, did not elect to go forward. At that time, late in year 98, a new player, Castle Group, stepped up and became interested and started talking with the city. The redevelopment agency in the interim had an opportunity to acquire the Standard Brand site from the former developer, as well as the Broom Brush Cafe, and had an opportunity to consolidate the entire remnant parcel to 5 acres, and they were able to, so to speak, present that as an entire package to the Castle Group, and the Castle Group came forward with this proposal. This proposal is essentially, and I'll kind of direct your attention to the overhead, is essentially a 5-acre parcel. 2.6 acres of that development is for the residential, and that's shown on the Emeryville, Emery frontage, and approximately 2.4 acres is along San Pablo, and that shows approximately 24,000 square feet of retail, but as we are conditioning this, we're allowing up to 26,000 square feet. That in a synopsis is the overall site plan, but I'd like to just give you a little more detail. The orientation of the residential project is actually is fairly unique, and it contrasts many of the projects in terms of Emery Bay Club and Apartments, Temescal Village, and East Bay Bridge, in that you can see the design, which we'll get to. It has a series of roads which are alternating pedestrian esplanades and driveways. The orientation is at an in an east-west direction, and the vehicular access empties onto Emery Street, and the esplanades do as well. So that's the circulation for that portion of the project. With regard to the retail portion, you've got a series of driveways which are cut along, two-way driveway here along Park. There is a right-in, right-out only here on this point in San Pablo, another right-in, right-out, and then a one-way in only from 45th Street to accommodate a future drive-through for what we hope to be a drugstore here at this location. The drive-through is located the drive kiosk for drug pickup is located closer to the site. That quickly is an overview. What we really liked about, we had an opportunity to actually go into Silicon Valley, I believe it was Cupertino, with Castle Group, Mr. Pollard, and take an example and see what this similar projects have done. We were really impressed, frankly. Much of the articulation, and I don't know if you had it in your site plans, was done with precast concrete, which is pretty innovative. You don't normally see that kind of articulation, and it's very, very rich. The colors and materials tend to almost be like a brownstone walk-up. If you look at the detail, you've got special paving and mixed stoop stepped up, and so when you're in the Esplanade, it really does read very as a rich pedestrian area. The back of the Esplanade actually has the driveways, and it's very clean and very smooth. But the scale of the project is what's interesting, because Emeryville doesn't really have anything that's comparable to it. Temescal Village is probably closer than anything else that we have, but it's circular. This is in rows, and it's a very clean, almost townhome style, with the landscaping and the other kinds of accoutrement, shutters, punched out windows, different two tones of colors along the edge, and then the kind of a rich roofing material. You're going to have a completely different feel than what you've seen before, and we think it's going to be a very positive feel. Briefly, what I'd like to do is just kind of jump to the retail, since I'm here at the board. We have very detailed plans for the residential. We do not have as detailed plans, which is covered a little later in the staff report, for the retail. There's a number of reasons for that, and so we're actually coming before the commission tonight, and we're asking that we deal with the retail in a more conceptual level, and ask that we deal with only issues that have to deal with the siting of the buildings, the location of the buildings, the overall circulation plan, the orientation of air, square footages, and whatnot. But the actual treatment that have to deal with the skin of the building, signage, hardscape materials, and landscaping plans, the real items that really dress the project up, we are asking that the applicant come in subsequently with a design review permit that comes back before the commission to give us that full level of detail. At this point, we are unable to make a determination on design review. We simply don't have enough information. but I think what would be very helpful for both staff and the applicant with regard to the retail application is for us to have some guidance with regard to those kind of hard elements that have to do with siding, circulation, orientation of the buildings, driveway cuts, and whatnot, so that it provides a template into which he comes in for his final design review. I kind of jumped ahead of myself, but I think that one of the key things that we like also about the project had to do with the density level. Many of you might be concerned about that. This density level actually would be comparable to a medium density residential. As you know, medium density residential allows up to 45 units per acre. This proposal is coming in at about 37, so that's actually pretty generally comparable to what some of the developments that we've already had in the city, except again, it's oriented much differently than those that we've seen previously. One of the major things that we find as a plus in terms of bringing the scale down is when you look at the Emeryville Club and Apartments and also East Bay Bridge, you have a massive parking structure underneath with the housing sitting above. In this proposal, you don't have that kind of arrangement. The garages are actually right underneath in the driveway areas with the housing above. So what you're effectively doing is bringing down the scale of this quite a bit. You don't have on-grade parking in a massive kind of collective, but you have individual garages under each unit. So it brings the scale of the project down, it brings the bulk of it down, and it makes it a much more pedestrian, residential, single-family type of, dense development as opposed to some of the other projects. We find that as a plus, and we think that it's going to blend very well with the abutting retail. So the scale is not going to be kind of, massive. These buildings here, and the reason we say that, let me give you exact, the retail buildings are going to be approximately 28 feet, 24 to 28 feet. The height of the residential buildings are going to be about 36. So as you can see, there's a pretty close match in terms of height. You're not going to have buildings that are significantly higher in the back or vice versa, so you're not going to get a lot of peaking. You're going to see a pretty homogeneous roof line, a little bit of articulation. And we feel that, given the overall policy direction of trying to create a good feeling, local, residential, retail, kind of commercial area, that scale would be conducive to the kind of long-range plan that we have here. One of the other areas I wanted to cover has to do with emergency access. The fire department reviewed the proposal, and one of the things that was department wanted was that there's a requirement that anytime you have a driveway that exceeds 150 feet, you're required to have a turnaround. In the 4 buildings here, which are in the northern section, they're exactly 150 feet, so no turnaround would be required. But for these last 6 buildings here that are on the south end, a turnaround could have been required for fire trucks. The fire department was able to can come up with an alternative plan which would waive that turnaround requirement to make the overall site plan work in lieu of the fact that the fire trucks would be able to get into the driveways, and in the esplanade areas, the applicant would consent to permit a 4-foot wide emergency access gates, which could be accessed from the retail portion. So the fire department now has the ability to get in from the esplanades from the east, as well as vehicularly from the east, from the west for the driveways. So with that in mind, the fire department was satisfied with regard to the fire preparation. The other thing that they were able to do, and it's also been as a condition of approval, is requiring 8 wet standpipes to be situated in the esplanade area, so that when the fire crews would have to go in there in an emergency, they would have the fire and wet standpipes available for them. So those are some factors that we had an opportunity to work through, and we were very pleased with it. Overall, I think the project is very complete. Again, with the portion of the retail that we did not, we're not recommending final design review approval on. The other thing we wanted to touch on has to deal with the site and the building orientation here, which is going to be reserved for design review, the building height and mass, And also there's a condition that has to do with future tenant uses. That's not uncommon for the commission. When we have instances where we have speculation retail that is coming in and we're not certain or we don't have commitments from the future tenants, we have set up an administrative tiered system where we have a list of uses that can be permitted outright, those that can be permitted through administrative use, and those that have impacts that may be considerable enough that they need actual full-scale design review and or use permit. So it's a tiered system of approvals to kind of fast-track and expedite the introduction of future commercial and retail uses in that area. So with that in mind, I would conclude my staff report. And again, we're recommending that you take action with regard to the mitigated neg deck first, and then action with regard to the preliminary development plan and the final development plan. Those actions would actually be recommendations to the City Council. They're the decision-making body, as well as the design review and the conveyance of the fire station, a finding that it's consistent with the general plan. That concludes my staff report.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff at this point?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, is this the one that's developing now, the one that showed their plans at a couple of meetings at the senior center?
Yes,
that
it
we
is.
saw?
Yes, it is. Same developed Castle Group.
Well, I don't know, I don't know what, but this is just, we're not going to decide it tonight anyway, but I have questions about the retail. I don't recall that at the time I thought they were going to have a better concept for the retail instead of flat roof boxes again, which the triangle did not want, and we stressed that.
The important thing to remember again, because of the approval for the retail, and actually I'm glad you brought that point up, Commissioner Bellangero, is that, again, for the conceptual design review, the key things that we want to lock in or have the Commission help us with tonight is not so much the details of the roof line, but actually the height of the building, the square footage of the building, the placement of the building, agreement in terms of the circulation plan. Those are details that we can work out. Now, for example, if the Commission had some consensus that they don't want flat roofs and they want some other kind of configuration, we can take that, share that with the applicant, and then when they come in for the final approval, we would not be really, looking favorably on a flat roof, or we may want to leave that open-ended. The key thing for them is that we're giving them a template or a framework to come back with a subsequently. The other important point, which I didn't touch upon in the staff report, but it also is piggybacking on your comment here, is that this retail section right here on the corner of Park and San Pablo was originally shown by the applicant at 7,200 square feet, a substantial area. One of the concerns of the redevelopment is to have two large, very viable retail spaces on the corner here in San Pablo to almost anchor these. As we evolved in the site plan, this site continued to shrink and shrink, so at 5,400 feet, we are concerned about how viable that area would be for a real strong retail tenant. And it's also been reduced from 60 to 45 feet. So one of the conditions that has been put in our staff report has to deal with the final decision for this area. The applicant, in order to maintain the 5,400 square feet, has to provide a credit-worthy tenant, and that credit-worthy tenant has to be reviewed by the redevelopment director, Mr. Pat O'Keefe, to make sure that that actual tenant would be viable. If in fact that tenant, for whatever reason, we do not feel would be viable, we are going to require that at least two of these units on this end be eliminated, the building be widened and expanded out from 45 to 60 feet. There'll be a realignment here so that we're creating a larger space and what we hope to be a much more viable space. So the trade-off is either the tenant provides a credit-worthy tenant that satisfies city's concerns at 5,400 square feet, or we're going to require that this building be expanded and we have two units lopped off here, create a much more viable space here. So that is in the staff report as a condition of approval. And the whole intent behind that is to make sure that we are not pinching in this area here and creating a space that's actually so small that would really not work to have a viable, ongoing, consistent tenant that meets the requirements that the redevelopment director really hopes to have for that area. And he may want to touch upon it if I haven't covered that accurately a little later on.
Other questions? If not, actually, while we're opening the public hearing, can you look at ND 2 and go through some of the numbers on there? I think they need to get revised to be consistent with the staff report. I'll open the public hearing. Is there any public comments? Actually, does the applicant want to make a presentation first?
Could you just repeat that question?
It says that, I read it, it says up to 112 residential units and 27,000 square feet.
Yes, because we want the neg deck to stand as having looked at that, even though something smaller is being recommended for approval. The negative declaration actually looked at 112 unit and 27,000, even though right
Okay.
now the actual project is only
Since
100.
I just got it,
Yeah, that's
hard
okay.
to figure that out. Mr. Castle, I'm sorry.
Chairman, members of the Commission, I'm Jim Pollard, Vice President of Development for Castle Group. First, I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address the Commission. I'm pleased to be here tonight to discuss the project with you. I want to start by saying that I've had the opportunity to review the staff report and the conditions of approval, and I find them to be complete.
Excuse me, did you have the ones that are stamped revised that just got
Yes.
handed out tonight? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
And as I say, I had the opportunity to review those, and I found them to be complete and acceptable. I think that I'm going to not make a detailed presentation regarding the project. I think the staff report and Barry did a very thorough job of describing the project in detail and describing the character as well as the content of the project, and so rather than be redundant, I think I'll just make a couple of very brief comments to supplement what Barry told you. First of all, Barry was describing the residential townhomes and the way they fronted onto the esplanades that provided pedestrian access to the front doors. And Barry explained that staff had visited one of our projects in Silicon Valley and were quite pleased with the aesthetics of what we build. I merely want to point out that in addition to buildings fronting onto the pedestrian esplanades with those front elevations, as we call them, the buildings that front both towards Park Avenue and 45th Street at the north and south ends of the project are oriented also. Those are the front elevations of those buildings. So I think that's important for you to understand that this project will present its best side out on all three sides that face out towards the community. Emery, in fact, the buildings that front towards Emery, those are really the ends of the buildings. We have prepared architectural elevations that Barry is pointing to now that illustrate that we have, quote, dressed those buildings up to present well towards Emery because that's a highly visible area. So we think of the front elevations of the buildings as the elevations that you see on the top of the sheet on the right, where you have a series of front doors and stoops and private entrances. But again, the ends of the buildings that face out towards Emery Street, which actually are the sides, so to speak, of those end townhome units, are also enhanced with wraparound porches and trellises and windows and detail so that they don't appear as big blank stucco walls, but are enhanced and present well. Does that answer your question? Okay. What I would like to just take a few moments and do is introduce you to the Castle Group. Because Castle has not done a project in Emeryville, you might not be familiar with our company and the people behind this project. I'd like to ask if I may distribute some corporate material that describes us. I know it's a bit unconventional. I've brought extra copies for the public if they're interested. Is it acceptable to hand these out?
Thank you.
with Shearwater.
The package I just handed out contains information on the key officers and principals of the company, some of the projects that we have done in the past, and a general description of our sort of corporate strategy and mission statement. Castle Group was created in 1993 by the two principal owners, Chris Kober and Bob Spiker. You'll find bios for both those gentlemen 2 or 3 pages back on, I believe, the left side of the package. Chris and Bob had previously been employed at Trammell Crow Residential. Bob was a founding partner of TCR, as it's known in the industry, and spent about 20 years with Trammell Crow Residential. TCR was and is a national apartment developer. Chris and Bob managed the development of about 26,000 apartment units throughout the United States during their tenure at TCR. As I said, Chris and Bob founded Castle Group in 1993. Castle Group operates exclusively in the Bay Area. Our niche is to develop high-quality infill projects with the urban aesthetic that was described well by Barry, both in his comments and in his staff report. I want to focus that we are quite, or I want to emphasize, excuse me, that we are quite different than many other players in our industry. We've got a very clear and conscious focus on innovation, both in the design of the product that we build, in the use of materials, and in the markets that we operate in. Our current projects include a 200-unit townhome project in Mountain View that is under construction, product very similar to the one we're proposing for this site. We also have 3 projects in the pipeline that we hope to start this summer, one being the Emery Village Center project we're here to discuss tonight, the 2 others being residential projects in San Jose that comprise a total of about 550 units collectively. I also want to note that we've added a strong retail player to our team to help us in the final design and leasing of the retail component of the project. Specifically, we've added Mr. Mike Corbett of Trammell Crow Commercial. Trammell Crow Commercial is a national commercial real estate firm and is accepted as one of the preeminent retail leasing entities nationally. Mike Corbett was also endorsed by Ron Gerber of the Emeryville Redevelopment Authority prior to being invited to join our team. Lastly, I want to make a few comments briefly on the experience that I've had working with staff here in Emeryville. I've been in the real estate development business for about 15 years, and the first 10 years of my career I was functioning as a practicing consulting civil engineer. And so I've spent a lot of time, what I refer to as grinding through the details of real estate development projects. I've probably done projects in 30 or 40 communities on the West Coast and in the Northeast. And typically, unfortunately, that process is characterized by a lot of needless bureaucracy, which leads to delays and unneeded expense. It's part of the business and we all live with it, but it's something that everybody wishes we could change. And I will say that my experience here in Emeryville to date on this project has been really unique. The staff has very professional and businesslike in the processing of our application and our project, and that's manifest in a lot of ways. They're very decisive, they're very clear about what they want, what they're willing to compromise on, and what they can't live without. And a real good example is in every community we go into, we invite people to come and tour our projects. We believe we build very high quality product and we stand behind the work that we do. This is literally the first community I can ever recall who took the time to come and allow us to show them stuff that we've built previously. It seems surprising, but I can tell you that it's very unusual for people to take the time to do that. So I commend and thank the staff for their cooperation, and I want to emphasize that as a community, Emeryville is very, very fortunate to have the particular individuals that I'm referring to working on your behalf. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the applicant? Hearing none?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
have a question.
Sir?
I know
Jim?
you talk about how great your buildings are, and of course I live in that area, and we've had a couple of meetings at the senior center, and the plans were submitted, and we are very proud of that area, and we want it to look good, but we don't want any flat roof boxes, and we let the person know that presented this to us, and we were assured that it would be, our thoughts would be taken care of, our ideas and so forth. So I hope, when you say that you do great buildings, I hope you are going to consider, we don't have to do it tonight, but you are going to consider some innovative ideas for retailing on San Pablo in our area there, not just flat top boxes.
I'm sorry I forgot to address that comment in my remarks. I actually was the person who made the presentation at the senior center 4 weeks ago or so.
I don't recognize you. You did? Yeah. I thought it was a younger man.
Anyway, what is your intention on the retail buildings?
I've been to a lot of presentations, and rarely do they veer into my personal appearance.
Welcome to Emeryville.
Right. The retail buildings are, it's true that they have flat roofs, but perhaps most importantly, these buildings, similar to many other retail buildings that are built throughout the Bay Area, have what are called parapet walls, which means that the exterior walls of the buildings project up several feet above the roof. And so what you see from street level, whether you're standing immediately adjacent to the building or across the street or down the block, is a uniform wall that goes up to 24 feet or whatever the number is, and there is typically some detailing up near the roof line, so to speak, the top of that parapet wall, but you don't see any flat roof or pitched roof or anything else beyond that. That is the proposal for these buildings. The alternative, I suppose, would be to do some sort of a pitched roof system. I will tell you that we're not steadfastly opposed to that. However, that's a very unconventional solution for this size and scope and type of building, and I'm not sure that the city would conclude, if we proposed that was the aesthetic you were looking for. I apologize, I frankly don't recall the comments regarding flat roofs.
Well, I can bring a few people that were at the senior center who remember that, because that's what we were definitely against, you see.
I would like to also...
But if you say if they're going to go, I mean, if it's not going to look like a flat roof, it's going to have some designs up there.
Correct.
Something.
Correct.
Not just some boards sticking up, though.
No. The exterior walls with all the detailing, the lighting, and the reveal, what are called reveals, the pop-outs and the recessed windows and so forth, that character and quality of expression will extend from street level all the way up to the top of the parapet wall. You will, in fact, not see any roof surface at all beyond. You will merely see the exterior wall and with all the architectural detailing thereon up to the roof level. So I'd also like to ask staff if they'd like to add any comments regarding this issue.
Well, probably it should be when design review comes for those buildings.
Design review isn't included, or the specific items including the architectural.
Right. So I think we should hold that for, but understand there's at least one member of this commission that's going to be looking at that when it comes.
Point well taken.
Okay.
Well, since we've had a couple of meetings at the senior center, and all those people in the triangle have talked about it and everything, I think we better stick to what they said they were gonna do.
I hear you.
I will note that, and we will work
We
through
have
that.
to look at that every day, those of us who live there. We will have to look at it, and I want something that looks good.
Understood and 100% in agreement.
Commissioner Valangero, we also could have another community meeting with the final designs prior to the issuance, prior to your meeting, at the commission meeting. That may be
Right.
one way to address it, because these are really only to make sure that we have the flavor of the character, to look at the footprints of the building, and to make sure that that kind of retail can be accommodated on site. The design details, as we've noted in the conditions of approval, are coming back to you as
But
recommended.
I just wanted to be sure before they went too far on the flat roof box deal, they didn't go any further.
Right.
That's it.
Okay.
We've, at this point, if you approve or recommend approval of the final development plan tonight, you will have signed off on the basic building blocks, the basic building footprints, the overall height, the sort of arrangement on the site, but we will have left the actual architectural details of the buildings, the actual design of the buildings, the sign program, the landscaping, and that's all detailed in the recommended conditions of approval,
For later approval.
for later approval.
Okay, thank you. The public hearing is open. Does anyone wish to comment on the Emery Village Center project? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. First item that we should talk about is the negative declaration. Staff, in the copy that was presented, there is no check mark or signature on it. What have you?
We will do
Signed
that as, we normally do that on the final draft that goes to.
So which box are you?
That it's a mitigated negative deck. There's
Mitigated
two
negative.
or three recommended mitigation measures. One having to do with air quality, and the other two having to do with lead-based paints or asbestos-containing materials for the existing buildings, and then the final sign-off from the Alameda County. Those are the only recommended mitigations.
Comments on that issue?
Approval?
You're moving approval of ND2? That's
Second.
Owens. Mr. Lutz has seconded.
Commissioner Koo?
Aye.
Commissioner Owens?
Aye.
Commissioner Germain?
Aye.
Commissioner Balangero?
Aye.
Commissioner Getz?
Aye.
Commissioner Lutz?
Aye.
And Chair Mooney.
Aye. The next item that I think would conclude this would be PUD 99-1, which
Right,
includes the...
and the guts of that are contained in the revised conditions of approval before you that have the big stamp.
Brian,
on there.
can you kind of run through the revisions and quickly? I mean, it's one of the things that looks interesting. Are we not asking this project to do street repair, but just to make the plans for the street
No,
repair?
I actually, that was one of the things that we had been talking about prior to your mentioning it, actually. We're requesting that the plans include the design, but we've amended, or recommend that you amend, condition 4B, basically saying that the applicant shall construct all public improvements as outlined in condition 4C 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, period. As part of this work, the applicant shall apply for and receive an encroachment permit. So that was a little bit of a confusing issue on our
Sorry,
part.
you said 4B? 4C?
4C, right, 4C.
Thank you.
4C 1, 2,
Right.
3, 4, and 5. I should note that with regard to the street improvements, on San Pablo Avenue, we're limiting those improvements to only the curbs, gutters, sidewalk repair, and new driveways. The remainder of those improvements will be included as part of the San Pablo Avenue revitalization program. But on the street frontages for Park Avenue, Emery Street, and 45th Street, they will be expected to both design them as well as to construct them prior to the issuance of finalization of the development.
Okay. Are there comments on the conditions of approval? Do we want to flip through them real quickly, or
I have some questions.
shoot?
On page 2,
Want to correct the typo?
Roman numeral 1D,
Before we get there, the paragraph above that, this development hall, It probably should be shall.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. That's all right.
You go on. Does the construction schedule set forth in the redevelopment agency agreement provide for a period which exceeds 1 year before the commencement of construction?
The details of the agreement are still being negotiated, and part of the reason for this provision was to avoid a situation we had with another project where the planning commission deadlines were different from the agency's schedule in the participation agreement or DDA, whichever it was in that case.
Fine. Top of page 4.
Okay, I have one change to that same page, Andy, just to, excuse me, it's condition 1F. What we've done in this condition, or tried to do, is give the applicant flexibility on a building-by-building basis, not on a unit-by-unit basis in terms of occupancy. So I've beefed it up just a little bit and would wish that the commission would incorporate the following language. Final inspection and a certificate of occupancy on a building-by-building basis shall not be issued until all construction and landscaping is complete. The remainder of that sentence remains the same. And then the underlined sentence should be, shall be reviewed and approved by the Public Works Department prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit for each building, not a building permit. That's way too early to look at a phasing plan for finalization. So I just wanted to make sure that that was revised. Thank you.
Yeah, I have, let's go backwards. I have 1C.
Okay.
And this relates to the item that Barry had mentioned in the aspect of the applicant shall demonstrate and confirm to the satisfaction of the Emeryville redevelopment director that a financially viable, creditworthy tenant can be accommodated with the retail pad at the minimum. That is very nebulous to me. What is can accommodated, and if the applicant shows a viable retail tenant and comes up and says, hi, how are you, and then the retail tenant goes and doesn't sign a contract or doesn't have a long-term lease or anything else, what does that buy us?
Perhaps the redevelopment director, Mr. O'Keefe, could explain the process that he would move through in order to demonstrate a viable, credit-worthy tenant, if you don't mind, Director O'Keefe.
For the audience, Pat O'Keefe. The provisions of the participation agreement that we're negotiating right now, which kind of overlap a little bit with what you're doing here tonight, as you can see in a couple of these conditions. It's structured such that we're not going to convey the property for them to start construction until they have certain leasing in place. One of the things that the Triangle neighborhood that Commissioner Bellangero mentioned wanted very much to have was a drugstore, and so we want to make sure that that's in place. So as we go through that process of approving those leases, this building will be one more check that we'll have. We'll make sure that we've got viable tenants that are willing to lease that space. I don't think I'm going to try and make any judgments about creditworthiness. We just want to make sure that we've got that we do have good, strong tenant interest. If we're finding that there isn't any tenant interest at that point, then I think we're going to want to look seriously at maybe taking a couple of units off the residential part and expanding the size of the space, retail space.
Thank you. Thank you.
Patrick, could I ask a question? With Pixar going in there and with the amount of people that are going to be employed there, do you mean to say that there's no one interested in opening a restaurant in that area?
There could very well be that
I
interest.
would think they would be on top of this, hopefully. There's no place for Pixar people to go if somebody doesn't open a restaurant.
Well,
Yeah, I think
very
between
upset about losing them.
Pixar and City Hall and 1500 Park, there's a restaurant out. Maybe we can invite Carreras back.
except that Pixar more than adequately has built a commissary for themselves, but anyway.
Well, now that's true, but I've also heard people say that you can only eat in your own commissary for so long, and then you have to get out and get some variety.
I don't disagree, and we hope they do it, don't we?
Well, I
Okay.
understand that Point Richmond restaurants are upset because they will be leaving Point
certainly
Richmond and people go there and eat.
Okay.
So
So-
somebody better
so-
get on the ball here.
So we gotten through F? G, H, I, J, K, L, Roman numeral 2, A, B,
Right.
Mr. Getz. Kind of
Top
interesting.
page 4.
Yes.
Such a plan shall include general site security operations for the exterior and interior areas of the store and grounds, particularly during the operating hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Is that, I don't understand.
Well, there may be a 24-hour drugstore as part of this,
Ah.
and that was a sort of a condition left over from the council's approval last year, but it did include 24-hour operation of a drugstore, so we wanted to make sure it was going to be okay.
Thank you. It does make sense. I didn't realize that. C1, that's a big water main with an 8-foot diameter.
Maybe they mean 8 inches.
Well, wait a second. The applicant accepted it already, so we're going to...
8 inches.
Okay. Very good, Gus. Why didn't you catch that, Jermaine? Okay. Yeah. Number 2, C2, C3, 4, 5, approximately 8. So we're going to let them go up and down a little bit.
It depends on the final configuration of the units.
Okay. The next page, page 5, any changes? 6, 7?
6, there's a couple of,
I noticed there's a few typos, but I presume that'll get cleaned up.
yeah,
Okay.
on item 3, it's not, we don't want to deal with dedication. What we want to do is say, shall be constructed by the applicant at their cost. And then at the end of that, the applicant wanted a little negotiating room on the 6-foot sidewalk. I'm not really, I don't really have a lot of, I have a lot of problem with that, but I want to make sure that the final design of the sidewalk and the streetlights and how they work, there's some flexibility in there. So I recommend that you add, at the sole discretion of the city engineer, the 6-foot wide sidewalk may be reduced at points along the eastern side of Emery Street, just to make sure that there's a little play in the final design of that sidewalk. But it will meet handicapped requirements, and it's a matter of looking.
Why at the sole discretion versus the discretion?
Okay, we can.
Okay.
I like soul and absolute.
I actually
Yeah.
like soul too.
He's got a good soul, okay.
I'll go along with it with the understanding that it's a mistake.
To
Reduce the size of
you
the
don't have to do
sidewalk
this.
below 6 feet
Right.
on a major street like San
Yeah,
Pablo Avenue where
No,
pedestrian
this is on
activities...
Emery. This
is
is
on
on Emery.
Emery.
Oh, I don't care.
And okay.
We're decisive.
Our thought was that this is a residential quality street.
Right.
That there's no sidewalk on both sides, only on one side, and it should be a good sized sidewalk
Yeah.
along Emery. So that was
Bedroom side windows.
well, there are street fixtures or street light fixtures, and so that reduces the width down. But there may be a way to incorporate landscaping so
It's
that
a
you get.
glorified driveway.
It's a glorified driveway,
Emery
but that will be
Street.
pedestrian access along that street.
Okay.
So what's the sense of the commission?
You know, the applicant doesn't have a problem. Why do we have a problem?
Well, because we're supposed to maintain certain qualities.
Because he's going to sell the units and be gone.
So 6 feet, are we going to leave it at 6 feet? The applicant can always come back and,
We'll probably
or at
leave
the
it
discretion of the
We
planning.
have the
Or
discretion
or
to
at
do
the
that.
yeah, put the discretion in there. Sole discretion.
Okay, sole discretion.
Appealable to the planning commission and city council. Okay,
On page 7,
gotcha.
the change to condition B, the applicant shall construct all public improvements as outlined in condition 4C 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, period. And as part of this work, the applicant shall apply for and receive an encroachment permit.
All
Just
right.
to make sure that was.
And that's actually D.
Oh, D, excuse me. Thank you.
Okay. Any other changes? If not, is there a motion to approve PUD 99-1 as changed, amended. Jermaine approves, and
Second.
Ms. Balangero beat you. Ms. Balangero second. Would you call the roll?
Commissioner Koo.
Aye.
Commissioner Owens. Commissioner Germain.
Aye.
Commissioner Balangero. Commissioner Getz.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutz.
Aye.
And Chair Mooney.
Aye. That concludes the public hearings, am I correct? And then we move it to a study session, which I presume the applicant will need time to set up.
Yeah, just a couple minutes to set up.
We'll take a couple minutes to set up.
I didn't bring my plans, so if you want to open them up. They are hot.
Okay, you gonna go next?
They still smell.
Not as bad. Not as bad.
So you're really like. Okay. Chair Mooney had to step away, so once again, I'm at the helm. Claudia, do you want to take this?
I'll introduce this, yes.
Okay.
Commissioners and members of the public, this is a study session on a proposed mixed-use retail and entertainment center that we have called the South Bayfront for quite some time. I will just take a minute to say that it's wonderful to be at this stage of this process, having completed our environmental review in February, and we now have a certified environmental document to draw from and to make sure that the project that is now before you is consistent with. But the purpose of this study session is to introduce you to the project as the developer now believes and conceives of it, which is slightly different than the base project that was studied in the EIR. We invite your comments, and I have addressed several issues in the small staff report that was included in your packets. We anticipate this project coming back before you in March as a major public hearing and agenda item. And at this point, the plans that have been submitted for us that you have in your packets call for 320,000 square feet of retail and mixed use, a 3,500-seat multiplex cinema sitting at the south edge of the site, parking in 3 major structures along the western edge of the site, and in addition to the base retail entertainment project, there is contemplated residential use above the parking in Block 2 and contemplated hotel use in a building above Block 1 at the northern edge of the site. The planning process for this is moving forward fairly rapidly at this point. We are reviewing these plans, and we'll be meeting in the next couple of weeks with the architect and the engineers trying to develop a set of conditions and requirements for the project. At this point, in terms of entitlements, we believe that the most useful approach and the most flexible approach may be the evolution and development of what we call the planned unit development, or PUD, for the site in order to make sure that the phases of the site can be easily accommodated. It appears as if the retail will move slightly ahead of the proposed housing and hotel. So the provision of an FDP, or final development plan, for the retail first, followed by FDPs for the hotel and the housing, is a likely scenario. As I noted at the beginning of my remarks, the final EIR has been certified and will be applied to this project that is now before you with regard to the major impact and mitigation areas that must be addressed prior to final approval. In reviewing this project for the last couple of days, I've been like you, I've only had a couple of days with these plans. I have noted 5 issue areas which you may want to consider along with your own comments, and I'll just briefly summarize them now. First, the structured parking that's been provided in the new plans will fully meet the parking requirements of the city. As opposed to the environmental impact report project, the current project now before you has been able to accommodate parking for the retail use that meets the city's requirements of approximately 4 per thousand, and then 5 per seat, 1 space every 5 seats for the movie theater portion. The concern I have is how this parking will work overall. There's 3 separate blocks of it. This is a large site. Most of the parking is ganged up on the southern end for the retail and the movie portion of the project. And how those blocks of parking will work together, as well as how the additional hotel and housing parking will work along with the retail, is a concern at this point, and the applicant has hired a consultant to help work through these issues. The second set of concerns has to deal with the site plan as currently proposed. As you probably are aware, the city for quite some time has had a pedestrian and bicycle bridge link between the east and west sides of this portion of the city within their general plan, and has even gone so far as to study feasibility for actual sightings of this. That analysis was included in the EIR and had the bridge sited north of where it is now on the JRTI plans. We believe that the northern alignment of this bridge is the only one feasible, given that the southern alignment proposed by the applicant is not going to work because it comes out on the east side on the Sherwin-Williams site, and we believe that there are some concerns with regard to that particular site and the past industrial uses that have gone on that site. The site to the north has been reserved as of the Chiron development agreement. We believe that that is the practical and feasible site for the pedestrian bicycle bridge linkage. Second site plan concern has to do with the Temescal Creek area. As you know, that was a particular concern to a number of citizens who live around the area, to develop the site along the creek in an interpretive way and to treat it with planting and maybe pedestrian amenities that would make sense for that alignment, given that the creek has to remain open for flood control purposes. I believe that that needs to be looked at and carefully considered, and I think it will be developed more fully in the landscape plans, but at this point we haven't seen how that's going to be addressed yet. The northern building block, Block 3, includes a future spine road connection to the northern Site B area, which is not part of this consideration. And I think that the design of the hotel entrance and the spine road easement to the north has to be carefully done to provide adequate loading and unloading area for the hotel, as well as to make that northern block work as best we can. The southern boundary area with IKEA is another concern we have. As you know, during the review and consideration of the IKEA development, their northern boundary and the Madison Marquette southern boundary was an area of concern with regard to providing as much and as strong a visual linkage as possible, given that they're not going to directly connect by car, and to provide a front sign area and activity area that makes sense for both projects, to provide as strong a connection as possible between both projects. So that borderline is a very important one to do well and to make sure that we connect as to the greatest extent feasible, given the South Bayfront design guidelines that have been adopted. In terms of architectural building and mass, I think that there's very exciting architectural features that have been proposed here. I like the overall design and character of it. I think there's a couple of elevations and building forms that need to be worked on, and most particularly coming out to me when I was reviewing them was the high blank mass of the theater on the southern edge of the site. I think that has to be developed a little bit more architecturally. And finally, the shell mound street loading, because of the lack of depth on the western edge of the spine road retail, the retail blocks along the western edge of the spine road are of very narrow depth given the width constraints of the site. To accommodate loading and utility areas, the applicant has placed those areas out front on shell mound. They're large expanses of what will be utility areas, trash areas, and loading and unloading areas for the restaurants and retail blocks that face shell mound. I have some concerns visually about how that will work, and I think that that needs to be thought out and developed a little bit more carefully, possibly considering the actual tenants that will go in there and being a little bit more flexible than just providing large loading areas that may or may not be needed in the future, looking at the tenant mix that has yet to be specified for those buildings. So those conclude my preliminary comments. I think the major intention of tonight is to allow the architect and developer to present their project and their concept, and to give you an opportunity to look at the project and present your comments and concerns. So with that, I will be glad to address any questions.
Any?
I'll wait.
Can you
So we should,
introduce Paul Heiss of Madison Marquette.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Paul Heiss. I'm with Madison Marquette. We're very pleased to be here at this stage, as Claudia said. I think tonight we really do have the purpose of presenting the project in its study format. A number of these drawings are hot off the presses, as they say, and some of them I've seen for the first time tonight. So it's really here, and we're looking for a true feedback type of work session. What I'd like to do, we've brought members of our team, the Jurdy Partnership, architects are here, and some other folk, and to solicit some feedback. The nature of our process is that the retail project is much further along than the other development pieces. We have, as you know, in the EIR, entitlement for residential and hotel development. We are in discussions with partners, potential partners, as we speak. Those meetings are happening around the country. And to some degree, those actual plans may affect what you see tonight. So I want to temper what you're looking at with some caution that we would like to come back and make sure that can adjust a few feet here, a few feet there. In general, what we've been trying to create is the village heart of Emeryville. And so there's some site constraints and some desires I'd like to explain to you here, and then ask John Waldron from the Jurdy Partnership to come up and talk about our ideas about how the buildings might actually look. There's no question in my mind that we are really excited about this project. It's the #1 project in our company's business plan at the moment. We believe that it's exactly hitting the market in terms of open-air village street retail types of projects, and we think that the other uses are going to really inspire that mixed-use urban density that I think that Emeryville is looking for. On the plan, we have approximately 20 acres here remaining south of or east of the Shell Mound site. It's quite narrow and long, and from that we immediately thought, let's create a street. So the village street spine is the most important aspect of the project. A true street with cars driving on it, with parking, sidewalks on both sides, open air with retail storefronts facing that street. The second piece is that we wanted to make sure that retail project, that partie, is authentic to the East Bay, what that means to the East Bay. Madison Marquette takes a real pride in trying to make sure that fits. We're concerned that a project of this size, 3-4 blocks long in a normal situation, if it feels like a shopping mall, we've failed. We want this to be a district and a piece of the community. So the design direction we gave to the Jurdy Partnership is we want buildings on the street, picking up on the best of what Northern California, East Bay architecture might be. And so you see behind me a number of very long elevations, and I apologize for how small they are, but you can see the size of what we're doing, that are really individual buildings with a lot of different character. There's stone, wood, stucco, metal. We're hoping to have people believe that this actually grew up over time. Now, there are pieces of the project where that just can't happen, and that's perhaps at either end. What we call the southern end of the project, the fat end of the thermometer, so to speak, is what we call Block 1, the entertainment block, where a large multiplex movie theater would be, multi-level food and retail, perhaps a bookstore, those kinds of uses. It's more of a weekend, nighttime use. That has a strong density to it, and then we've gone ahead and placed residential and hotel uses further north on the site, trying to balance out that density. The entertainment project hangs together a little bit more strongly as an architectural theme, and I think Jurdy will talk about that. We've worked hard trying to create a district. We've picked up on what we think is very excellent design on the Shell Mound Bridge, the light fixtures, the idea of having this integrate and spread out into the community. Claudia was right that we have hired Walker Parking to review exactly how the access works in the parking garages. We actually have some new schemes as to how that traffic flow works. The placement and the location is the same, but we can do things like speed ramps, working with temporary parking areas or valet parking where the residential parking works, to make sure that this machine for allowing people to come in and park effectively works well on the project. First and foremost, we believe the project is a village center, street retail, part of the East Bay. Second, we think that it needs to work in the state-of-the-art sort of format, handicap accessible, all fire codes met, parking to code, making sure that what retailing becomes in Emeryville in the next 20 years really is satisfied in this location. So we're very, very concerned about that. Part of what Madison Marquette does is make sure that these projects become an urban center. So at either end of the project, we have created some plazas. Now, we would be activating those with, I could sit here and say it's going to be an art show and a car show and all kinds of stuff. We don't know what that's going to be, but at least we're going to create the space for that to happen, allow it to be programmed for events, and to have somebody who came to Emeryville and saw one of our major plazas say, I was there. It's the photo opportunity. It's the place to be. If you look at direct your attention to the sort of perspective renderings on the wall up there, I think the heart of the project is actually the middle rendering. Now, what that is a street with buildings on the street. We'll have to come back and discuss and analyze, are those the right buildings? Do they have enough character? Do they have the right signage? Do they have the right storefront plan? But it's the promenade, village shopping street experience, yet supported by structured parking just back through the project that we think is the heart. Just to the left, you see a view from the second level of the Block 1 Entertainment Plaza, where we're going to create this landscaped, open-air, perhaps Italian piazza type setting, programmed. We don't know what the landscape is yet. We're not really sure what the paving is, but it's the idea that it's a space ringed by buildings in which this is a community heart. It's driven by the movie theater and by the uses that are there, the bookstore, the restaurants, and whatnot. In keeping with the district idea, if you look on the rendering on the right, it's the idea of pulling in some of the East Bay types of architecture, buildings with great vines on them, stone, brick, stucco, metal. And there's a casual character here that we don't want to lose, some of the heritage of the signage and graphics and things that are applied to the project that we think is the sort of sophisticated and yet loose kind of feel of the East Bay. It's interesting to see here what we didn't do. This is not Santa Barbara, California slick, nor is it sort of a chic Seattle modern. We think it's a apropos collection of buildings that allows individual flexibility and individual architectural expression along this quite long street. The partie of the sort of distance of the shopping street here is really, and depending which city you're on, 3 or 4 city blocks long. And so it's very hard to say which piece is appropriate or not. There are some other things here. We have some image boards in terms of materials. I think that our aspirations are very sophisticated in terms of the use of materials, but aren't necessarily expensive in terms of what they are. We have some early leasing plans, and I'm not really prepared to comment on the leasing necessarily, but you can see that there are a number of single and double level users that actually drive the retail project. Most of the shopping that would be done here is at the street level, promenading up and down the main street. At the entertainment block where the theater is, it allows you to go vertically, and some of that stuff we're just now working on, making sure we know where are our escalators, where are our stairs, where are the public amenities that drive that piece. With that, I'd like to ask John Waldron to come up from the Jurdy Partnership. He's the design architect for the project at the moment, and have him explain the buildings.
Well, thank you for having us here this evening. We're very excited to be here and at this point of the project and to be able to present it to you. As Paul described, I mean, the main key to the project as it's been conceived is the street, and that is both the vehicular and pedestrian spine of the project. and the place-giving part of the project. At the Jody Partnership, we really focus about spaces. It's about the places we're creating. And a lot of times that means the buildings become the backdrop to that. And there are different layers that get attached to the buildings. There's signage, landscaping, there's street amenities that go into the street. It's parking in front of the street. So we've taken a lot of time in terms of studying the exact proportions of how wide the street should be. You know, angled parking versus parallel parking, how that all works. And we feel very comfortable that we got, you know, in our study that we have really where we want to be now, which is two-way traffic up and down the street, angled parking on the one side in front of the shops, and then the side to the east being supported by the parking structures, which is really a unique part of this project, is that unlike traditional main streets where they're typically underserved by parking that don't allow modern-day retailers to come in and be in downtowns, what this project does is, because the parking structure in the back provides that density, allows the more national retailers to come in and actually find a place in the project. What we've done along the street, then being the spine, connects a series of different parks and plazas and patios, starting with on the north being the entrance plaza, which is the north rendering that Paul described, which is the elliptical shaped at this point plaza where you'd enter in off the Christie extension. And we have, as depicted in the rendering up here, one major building on that. Part of what we try to do is kind of script a street. Because the idea is to be authentic, we've looked towards the kind of history of Emeryville, history kind of the Bay Area. We think this should be Northern California vernacular, you know, specifically East Bay. We've been drawing on images of kind of arts and crafts, Mabec styles, Monterey style, which all kind of focus on natural materials, kind of horizontal proportions, texture, and landscaping. So we think that that's a very appropriate aesthetic for the project. And it also has a scale, which is kind of lends itself very well to this project too, which is the one-level retail shops along Shell Mound, given a base along the railroad side of the project, which will actually end up being the podium for future air rights above. That's the other thing the parking structure gives us also. Because we have the parking structure, we've actually created on top of that, which we'll come back later, with additional opportunity to put other uses on top, the residential and hotel, which we feel really makes this an authentic place. You have lights on in the windows at night. It becomes a true town center. And that, you know, for us to reach our goal is that this becomes a vibrant, you know, 24-hour town center for the, Emeryville that serves the Emeryville citizens as well as the surrounding communities. The second rendering shows Main Street, and again that's the block 2. And as we come down the block here in the center of that, we have a drop-off, which might be the future residential drop-off. There becomes another small kind of patio courtyard along the way. There may be cafes, tables spilling out in that area, but the idea is that we kind of fashion these almost as if it's a necklace, where the street becomes the string of the necklace, and you have different kind of beads along the way, different kinds of activities. So there are spots where it opens up, where we have the entrance plazas, other spots where you walk along, you have little inline shops, patios spilling out in some places, and then open up to courtyards and other places for entrances to retail or to residential. Continue down the street, we come to the intersection at Temescal Creek. We think that's a kind of open space corridor, described as a plan now. And to look at it now, it's hard to find that it's really an amenity. But open space is an amenity. So I mean, the idea of having a corridor come through there, we see the idea of dressing up the creek, and we want to dress it up. It's got to look better than it does there today. What we envision is that it could be something that celebrates kind of the art history of Emeryville. That you know, I grew up in the East Bay, and I remember driving up and down the freeway and seeing the sculptures, the mud flat sculptures change. You know, every time you go by, and you know, it's just a rich piece of history that many people know about up here. And when you look through the renderings, actually, you'll see different places where we've depicted some of the driftwood sculptures. And those, at this point now, it's just a part about building the story. Not that we'd actually reproduce those sculptures, but that art is a big piece of Emeryville. It's got, as I understand, the largest number of artists per capita in the state or country, or I mean, but which is wonderful, and that should be celebrated, that we think that that's a spot where in a park setting could provide the opportunity for a re-expression of that history of Emeryville in terms of public art. Then we continue across into the entertainment plaza, which is the main plaza, the main square of the project, which is depicted in the left rendering at the top here. And that's the, called the entertainment plaza, sort of the cinema. A lot of these projects, that's kind of the main anchor on that, of that end of the project, and that'll be really the main evening focus of the project. That's the only place we have a second level terrace, and which works real well for having dining overlooking a park, some views out across the bay. Otherwise, all the shops and stores are on the street. We don't have any second level. We don't have any second level walkways, and that again is very intentional. Second level walkways start to say mall all over the place, and you start to see that. The intention is it wants to be street authentic. What we have done when we get down to Block 1 is because it's a bigger part of the project, we need to start scaling up because we've got the operators of cinemas these days are much bigger, and we have to start to scale it up to that size of building. And it's also the big visible presence from the freeway and entrance to Emeryville. Our vision for this project is that it's a downtown town center for Emeryville, a main street, but it's going to be a new front door to Emeryville. So everybody going by here, that this project, when it's built, should say, Emeryville's, this is Emeryville today. That was Emeryville before. We've taken this site now, and now this is the new Emeryville, and we're moving into the future. So the buildings scale up to that. You start to see on the elevations at the end down here, where we have the buildings get bigger. There we're starting to look at drawing on some of the kind of more waterfront images that you start to see in some image boards down here also, which we got Jacksonville Landing here, Ghirardelli Square. We start to get kind of the different kind of quad kind of relation to the industrial past, but in a way that allows you to build in history. So I think that scale and stuff is very appropriate. The signing, the idea of a big Emeryville sign. Another thing to remember is a big Sherman-Williams sign that used to be on the site there. I remember this. I think I read somewhere it's the largest neon sign east or west of St. Louis. At one time you could see it from Alcatraz. But there's an opportunity there. Those kind of things. You remember, it makes skyline. And we show in some of our other renderings, you'll start to see skyline signs on top, and we've used just some clippings from Emeryville's history of the Justin Ironworks and stuff to indicate, just at this point, signage pieces. There'll be an environmental graphics. Some of them will be, history. Some will be advertising. Some for tenants in the project. Some will be promotional for cultural events. But that skyline as you get layered on again, it's not just about just the buildings, but it's about the layers that we attach to the buildings. Those layers become signage. We have trellises. We have some buildings that you'll see in the elevations that have just vines growing on them. Just vine-covered buildings where it grows up around the storefronts, and you have letters cut out. It's very appropriate to kind of the style that we're looking for also. Maybe if I can go address a couple of issues that Claudia brought up. One kind of specifically kind of the servicing that we're showing along Shell Mound, because you could very easily consider Shell Mound the backside of this project, because the main street is running parallel to it. And what we've done for this,
No? Okay. Like I was saying before, the big idea about the project, the main street, is really supported by having this parking in the back. And then what we've done is we've brought in streets that come in perpendicular in 3 locations that are all signalized. This is all built into the traffic study that was done for the EIR that allowed people in, and from that point they can drive right back and get into parking structures very conveniently. So that services that, or you get the daytime, that's when it's real busy, or somebody's been there before. You can come down the street and you might find a spot to park. There's an opening, lucked out, found a spot to park. Otherwise, you don't find you can pull back and park in the parking structure. The other thing is servicing. Same thing, that a lot of the traditional or older main streets didn't provide the kind of servicing requirements that are necessary for or desirable for a project, a retail project. a lot of you go to a traditional Main Street, the services on the street, you'll have dumpsters rolled out on the street, trucks stopping the street, blocking traffic. We're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So what we've done is, if you look at the lease plans, most of the large tenants we've located towards the, let me put that up here. Most of the larger tenants we've located to the east side of the site, which is side towards the parking structure and the railroad tracks. These drives come in, and then we have service areas that are off those tucked back into the parking structures. Same thing, you come down here, surface areas parked in here. We'll end up probably having another service area down here as we develop a hotel on this end of the site. And that's why we put the bigger tenants there, because they have the bigger service requirements. We still have a lot of shops out here in the front of the project, and to attract the kind of tenants we want to have in this project, we also need to be able to service those tenants, not only for the trash going out, but also the merchandise coming in. And to have a service area back here and expect somebody to take their merchandise out and come back around to a shop just isn't going to work. Or by the same token, for the trash to go out the same way. So we've developed a small service areas in each of the 3 blocks along the side here, which have a single lane for a truck to pull in that can stop, unload, and then pull back out, or in like manner for a trash truck to come in, pick up the trash, and then pull back out. In the elevations along this drawing right here, you can start to see where we've actually developed trellised, vine-covered walls that screen those areas. There's a driveway in, it's screened, and then there's a driveway out. But the only open part is the driveway. Then we'd hide back behind these other areas, the trash dumpsters, the meters that are required for those buildings, utility meters and such, but they would be all screened from the street. But we feel that's very kind of crucial to attract the kind of tenants that we'll need for this project. Part of the idea also in those trellises is the idea that we've got this vocabulary of buildings which want to be different, expressive of the different tenants. We also see an overlay that there is kind of a project identity also, which about the place, a branding, which is a common term called these days, about Emeryville Town Center, or we're still what the name actually ends up becoming. That's kind of the name we've been using right now, Emeryville Town Center. But there'll be a name that this is everybody recognized as the place, and with that, there becomes an icon. And we've started to just look at some things you start to see on the corner of these. We're picking up the idea of a tower and a gateway, and some of the drawings you see, we've actually picked up where you drive into off of Christie Street, the idea of a Main Street, Pleasanton, Main Street Emeryville. You drive in, that becomes the same kind of street making, place making parts of the project. And again, with an identity tower down at that end that relates to that. So coming down from Christie that says, I've arrived, this is the project, I can come in. The same thing from down at the south end, from the freeway that wants to have a major identity. And that kind of identity is not only just from the street, which is the one side is. This identity wants to also scale up to say everybody going by on the freeway, hey, here we are. This is Emeryville. This is we've arrived. This is the place. Big sign out here too that says pull off here. There's a lot of maze of freeways out there that you've got to navigate before getting to the site. This I was actually just checking earlier today. This sign is a little bit. We're not actually even as tall as the sign over at the bridge, East Bay Bridge project right now, which I was kind of surprised at. But when I was driving by now, they're driving piles out there for the IKEA, on the IKEA site, and there's a big pile driver coming over the bridge. You can see that. And that's what we want to be able to see, that you can drive by and you see that that's the place. I know that I'm coming to it. I get ready to, get off the freeway because it's complicated now. You can't get off at Powell Street sometimes. You have to work your way back around, but there's a marker there. So we started to develop a language, and we'll be refining that as we develop the branding of the project. That's kind of this kind of stickly craftsman kind of look to the project, that there's identity, and that builds into the signage, the icons, some of the trellis elements, all of that kind of project language, which will then make it a district within the town too. Materials, I'll go through kind of very quickly here. This represents our material palette. The center board here represents kind of images that we've drawn influences from, waterfront images, especially kind of detail images, looking at some of the brown shingle, flank red right, kind of eave details. A lot of that style that East Bay is derived out of those simple details, simple horizontal lines, overhangs, how that's done. It's not flashy and fancy. It's just very, it's really kind of earthy. It's the style. Then also materials, brick, plaster, masonry bases. This represents our palette we're looking at for the buildings, which is the simple plaster buildings, different kinds of texture on the plaster, sometimes hand-finished plaster, sometimes more machine-finished plaster. Some is kind of metal for mullions, colors, wood trellises, brick, variety of different colored bricks for different building pieces. The idea of using some stone and cast stone for bases along the building. And I encourage you later to come up and look at much closer, because as you walk through these elevations, this drawing here and the drawing below are both sides of Main Street, from the block 1 to block 2 up and down each side. That's about 1,500 feet of elevation on each side. So there's a lot of buildings here, and we've actually, when you look at some of these here, you look back and you look at the lease plan, you go, that building lines up with that shop right there. I mean, some of them were at that point where we're talking to tenants and we're trying to make those things line up and say, okay, well, that would be, you can go to him and talk to him about that's his building, that's his building, that's his building. We're not at the point where we're saying they've agreed to that's what it looks like. But we've developed a character, and now we'll go back through and we'll talk about how we move forward from here. A lot of the national tenants will have particular identities they want to have, and we'll work with them in terms of how that works. And actually, to a great extent, it's appropriate that a lot of that happens in here, because to be authentic, we always have the trouble not wanting to look like everything's from one hand. And we actually, even as a design process within our office, we have a variety of designers work on projects, because otherwise you get the look that just one person's gone across and it becomes looking like a project rather than a village. And if we look like a project, we, again, like Paul was saying, we will not have succeeded. This wants to have that authentic feel to it, and it's very hard to do without looking Disney-esque. You can go very themed. There's lots of examples where that's happened, or without looking like a shopping center. And so I think it's a mixture of having the expression of the right kind of tenants that want to come in and give their expression, the overlay of what the place is, and very strong understanding of whoever comes into about what we're creating here. And I guess that kind of closes up most of what I'm trying to say. I think we're very excited about where we're at. We're very excited about moving forward with the next steps as we work with the city and working out kind of all the details that were mentioned here. And there are a lot of little details we need to work out before coming back to you next time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That was nice. Thank you. One of the things I just wanted to point out, it's sort of subtle on the drawings. The sort of grayed-in areas here are to scale for what we believe the residential and hotel portions would be. You see it most directly here from the elevation from Shell Mound up above. I wanted to talk for a moment about process, and it becomes very important to us and difficult collectively to go forward. Obviously, I'm sure what you would like to have is, hey, what are you guys going to do? Just tell us and we'll approve it and we'll tell you. And that's we'd love to be able to say that, but it's hard for us in the iterative process that we're in, especially in the retail development. What we think we're going to do is come back with a PUD and help to try to describe, perhaps within design guidelines, signage guidelines, other things, something that would allow people to come in and say, do a storefront, or do signage, or do awnings, and create a menu and a palette that would be acceptable to you, that we could then move forward. And I'm sure there's a process where, say, a big tenant wants to come in and take a corner, and they want their architect, and they want to come. So fine, that goes into a separate process, has to come back to this group and be approved independently. We're trying to sort of build that fabric of the street, and that's something I think that's outside my understanding of how the Emeryville processes work. Though I did sort of hear glimmers of it there about uses. So we'll be talking about uses and then talking about exactly what that means visually. And that's something I think it's very important to us to allow that flexibility to go forward, and we will be coming back with, I think, a much more definitive plan inside the PUD. One of the things that John mentioned, I wanted to just, it was one of Claudia's comments about the image from Shell Mound. If you look on the lease plan, at the major entrance corners, we sort of wrap those corner tenants back out to Shell Mound, and we would assume that they would have storefronts, displays, signage, graphics out on that street. But like all good buildings, somebody's got to be on the back. We looked hard at making Shell Mound the street, but when we really analyzed it with Powell Street Plaza and the sort of width, depth, speed of traffic on that street, it isn't really a shopping street. It's a thoroughfare, and so we had to create it again. And I accept the comments that are, hey, don't make that the image of Emeryville, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're somehow integrating it, but I think the pedestrian character might not really be achievable on Shell Mound Street. We do very strongly want to connect with IKEA. We have the idea of having a strong pedestrian link. We had talked before about having the Emery Go Round and other things sort of come through that. You see it a little bit better in this, the lower site plan where the road can come through. We don't know if that's necessarily the same shopping trip because the size and scale of that building and their parking being further south. We'd like to have that integrated. Sounds good. We want it to work. We're on board with that. I just don't know how it's going to go.
Have you thought of adding a little bright blue to the color scheme?
Hey, that'd be great. Well, I think IKEA is going to be a great thing for the community here. Anyway. We are definitely excited about the idea of creating the bridge across the railroad tracks to the Chiron property. We're not driving that process at the moment, but we would like to have that come in along the Temescal Creek area. We think that's the right connection for us. So we're on board with that, but we didn't speak to it. We would love to find a way to connect further north, can maybe continue that street. In the discussions we've had with some of the hotel prospects, there's an idea of perhaps bridging over or creating a better knuckle there, but the idea of continuing this idea further north is an idea we'd like to explore. And last, I wanted to address the idea of the theater as the big plain box. It is and it isn't. We're sort of in both, neither here nor there. We do really, on the lower left-hand corner, abut the IKEA piece. So potentially, really, the front end of that is what's most visible from the freeway section. And you see in that site plan the large sort of dark gray area. It's what you see sort of here as a shed-roofed or sort of market hall type building. And what we were trying to do is to create that as the true presence out at the freeway. So it's front and center. It's out really in your presence. And I believe that most of the mass of the theater structure is actually either already obscured by IKEA or behind. And that being said, we should decorate it in the most appropriate way, sort of knowing what it is. That being said, I think that what I'd like to really have is your true feedback to us about image and style, what you want as to see as the sort of theme of the project. Our drawings, because they come out in a very definitive way, are ready to go. We could be back in a month with a true retail plan, subtly adjusted with your comments. I do believe that there will be additional comments that will come from these other uses. So we're moving real fast here, but I think we're ready to catch up to your comments. And so with that, I conclude our presentation and ask for your questions.
Well, thank you. So what is the next step we should take? Just a chat among
yeah, I've got some comments.
We could take comments from the individual commissioners, and then the next step would be to come back after having worked with the architect and the design team a little bit more in the next 3 weeks, actually, and come back to you on the 25th of March. That's our plan.
Okay. So who would like to open up with some
Okay,
comments?
yeah, I've got a comment. One of the things I hear was the image of Emeryville and the town center and all these things, and I've been here a long time, and we've been through this process of building this city for a long time, and I'm certainly very excited about the project. But what I see is, I'm going to take an imaginary visit to Emeryville, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to stop by, you know, the west side of Powell Street where the new Bay Trail is going to go around there. Really nice Emeryville Crescent. It's really beautiful. I'm going to take a walk down to the marina. I'm going to come on back up to the marketplace, maybe have some coffee at Borders Books. I'm going to walk over to Plaza and maybe buy a CD or go to Trader Joe's. Then I'm going to walk through your project, play around there. I'm going to walk a little farther, and I'm going to go over the beautiful 40th Street Bridge, maybe do a little shopping, go by Bridge Housing, cut back up north, go through the renovated Park Street Overlay District, go by the new City Hall, Pixar, Chiron, go up to Powell and see the beautiful Wareham building, the gorgeous train station we have there. So I see this not as the city center, but as a continuum to this whole process, right? So I think it's very important that the connectivity issues that the staff brings up are very important. When they talk about Shellmond, Temescal Creek, perfect case. Hopefully you're going to hook up with Hilton in the way they're going to design it, etc. So and the project's beautiful, and there's a lot of excitement there, but we as planners have to fit this within this entire planning process that's been going on well over a decade. So my strong suggestion is to really work very closely with staff on their issues, because it's come through a lot of bloody noses, etc. And we've had a lot of developers in here saying, well, we can't do this, and this is the only way we can do it. And sure enough, we turn out to be a beautiful, beautiful project. Well, certainly Chiron has significantly changed for the better for that. Kaiser, before it was gone, would have been a better project. So I think it's very important to understand that aspect of it. Specifically, there's a couple of other things. One of the things about the entertainment district that concerns me is the security issue. So I would certainly hope that you really take a look at that quite seriously. I'm sure you will, and I'm sure the staff will be in with that. And that's about it for now. Other than that, I really like what you're proposing, and look to see some more specific and concrete examples.
Okay. My two subjects are the approval process and the parking. As to the approval process, this city has on many occasions approved master use permits and is sensitive to the needs of multi-retail developers who need to have flexibility as to kinds of uses and scheduling and timing, and even master design review approvals, in which a series of general approvals are granted, and then the developer is in a position to make facade changes, use changes, size and shape of tenancy changes as the market dictates. And I think that the City Council and Redevelopment Agency is sensitive to those needs, and staff is experienced in drafting those kinds of documents, and you can expect that kind of support here in Emeryville. As to parking, I noticed that there are a variety of standards and references that have been used in the EIR, in the blueprints before us, and they don't match. And what I would like to see when the permit process comes to a head is not a approval process which is based on existing code, but one which is based on actual likely demand. And with Walker and Fair and Piers available to you, you have the most experienced people and can be expected to use not just the most current references, but the most recent studies about the likely parking demand. And this city is capable of analyzing shared parking applications, but we don't want to see an application that's hiding behind zoning code standards. We want to see that the project is not going to get in trouble on parking. And the parking analysis that comes up with 2,000 spaces doesn't look to me like it cuts the mustard. So you'll see that the spaces required per seat in the theater is unrelated to that in the EIR, that there is inadequate information as to restaurant and retail uses, which of course have dramatically different parking demands, and that there has, we're going to need to see analysis. You have high turnover restaurants. You're going to have parking demands that are very time sensitive, so that looking at the shared parking analysis is going to be very important. And if you get in terrible parking trouble, everybody's going to be in trouble, not just you and the city, but the tenants and the whole project. So we'll be looking at that pretty closely. That's it.
Okay, I would like to ask a question. Do you have anchor stores, or will you have?
It's a dumbbell.
The best answer is yes and no. The true anchors in the old world of department stores are not planned for this project. However, the major movie theater and the larger tenants that we're talking about, really anybody above 15 to 20,000 square feet that promotes itself is an anchor these days. And without getting into specifics, somebody like a large bookstore or a large record store or a large fashion shopping store would be something that would be not provided in this region of the East Bay at the moment, and advertises and is well known. And so if somebody wanted to go to Pottery Barn, they will come. Now the large, let's say Pottery Barn of today, multi-level, actually is a draw for this kind of project. The truest anchor for the project is its overall merchandising. The collection of day, nighttime uses, food, fashion retailing, and hard goods allow this machine to work correctly, knowing that we're not likely to get say a Nordstrom here or a Macy's. It's a possibility in the future. People have tried. If we have $40 million to spend, we can go buy a Nordstrom. But I think that's the best answer. We believe that the project will be energized midweek, in the evening, weekends, with these different uses that are strong, viable retailers.
In other words, I'll still have to drive out to Walnut Creek. I mean, if I want something at Nordstrom's or something like that.
Yes, for a major department store, yes.
Little shops don't interest me that much. They're great. I think they're terrific to browse, but there's certain things that you shop at Nordstrom's or Macy's for.
Absolutely, yes.
So anyway, okay, let's see, I have another question, I think. This is quite a large area. And you're going to have quite how many, about three parking areas, I understand? 1, 2, 3?
Yes, basically 3 major blocks.
Because it's not really pedestrian oriented. I mean, you're not going to start at one end and work towards the other. It's impossible. A person couldn't walk that far and shop and enjoy themselves, I don't think. At least I can't. Anyway, okay, no anchor stores. I had a question about the driveways in, but you said you were going to put some streets in. That's about it. That's it for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to speak to the size of the length of the project. I think it's true that on most times, people are not gonna, it's not a mall that you go to and it shop the whole thing. And therefore it is merchandised to have different feel to it. I mean, we like to coin a term, it's called the expert user, the person that's been here more than once or twice and knows that they're gonna go on Friday night to a movie and dinner, and they'll park at perhaps the south end of the project. However, on Wednesday after a day of work, they can stop by to a fashion retailer, and they know where to park as well. It's not unlike perhaps portions of 4th Street in Berkeley or College Avenue or Piedmont Avenue, Union Street in San Francisco, Post Street, that different shops are in different locations in a block.
Are you saying that you're going to have just restaurants at one end?
No, I'm not. They'll be distributed, but we believe that the true customer, that the area that this is serving, that people will learn where to go, and it'll be only the exception that will actually shop the whole thing at one time.
I guess my concerns would be parking, but Andy dealt with that better than I could have. But my concern is that it sounds fantastic, and I have similar concern that staff had, is that, and you said it pretty well when you said you couldn't make Shell Mound into a pedestrian right away. I just hope the project doesn't turn its back on Shell Mound, and that be primarily perceived as service access there, and that it's visually treated better than what you would consider a service access.
I mean, I don't really have that much to say. I think your expectations of what you want to put there are higher than we expect you will have there. And we happen to think that we have some really truly beautiful places, such as Chiron and such as Emery Station and other areas to focus on. And we're really just asking you to complement what we already have in your own style and in your own way. And I think this is, I'd like it to almost look a little bit more like 4th Street, and to a certain extent you're envisioning that. I think this is going to be a lengthy process. It's going to take some years to develop and to really grow into where it ends up being what we want it to be. I think conceptually speaking, you've got it, because you recognize that we do not want what the hell is it? A shopping center, okay? What we want is a place to go and walk through. And from that aspect, you've got it. I also understand that the future hotel or residential or whatever, is a figment of everybody's imagination, and it's subject to whatever the market will call for and what will happen in the economics of the times. I do, however, believe that it will happen because we're in the right place, an urban area. It's close to where it's happening, and people are going to come back here to live here, and people are going to come back here to shop and play. I think you're cracking a big nut here, and I truly appreciate it, and I'm glad you guys are as big as you are and have the financial stability to see it through. I don't care about the parking because they're going to make you do that. And I know I'm not going to get a Nordstrom's. I've already emotionally adjusted myself to that. So, but I think that you're having the right idea about what it is that we want.
Could I add before that the Park Overlay District that we had a meeting on prior to this Planning Commission similarly would like to model itself after the 4th Street area. So if that bridge can go to a more southern alignment, you perhaps connect with that area. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm not sure what I think of this project. I think conceptually you've got it. Execution's a different matter. And I agree with Commissioner Lutz about the image of Emeryville.
I would be sad to see this become the one and only image of Emeryville. I don't think that's possible. But it almost sounded like that was the intent of it, and perhaps you were just over-exuberant about that. I find myself in sort of a catch-22 here. I see the big concepts here, and it looks really great, but at the same time, I don't see any details about how the individual shops or circulation works or anything like that. And one of your goals is to create a village that is very independent of every user. So I understand you can't come up with the details, so I'm stuck here. It's not a criticism, it's just something that I've noticed. And that gets back to how well the execution is going to happen. It's been mentioned about the parking. I agree. I also agree with Chris that that's going to be worked out, but it has to work. If it comes up here and we see that we have to make some concessions, I think most of us are going to be pretty unhappy about that. Regarding Shell Mound, if somebody came to me and said, we're going to have a project here and the loading area is going to be facing Shell Mound, I'd just walk away. I'd say that's crazy. It's not going to happen. It's unacceptable. But you've shown that that may be the only answer to some questions we have here. But it needs to be done nicely. Okay, that doesn't mean just throw up some vines. We can hide some cars. We need more evidence than that. And I don't know what that evidence is. I mean, it's a tough question to answer, but it's one that you have to address to make at least some of us happy with it. I got through about the little individual shops, and you addressed that, Paul, about the corporate identity of every shop. And I think Andy talked about the process of how that can happen and how we can make it easier for you. Just wanted to mention it. The signage. You talked about a big sign that sort of, I think John said, here we are, we're Emeryville. That's something you don't find in that is something you find in a mall. That's not something you find in a little village or 4th Street. I realize the marketing need for that. Maybe there's a more subtle way of doing that. The roof. I came down real hard on IKEA on a couple things. One of the things was the way the roofs looked from the freeway. And I think it's important that even though this is, in a sense, a much smaller scale because we have smaller buildings, it's important that we hide the mechanical systems and things like that. Make it look nice from above, something a lot of people forget. I also came down real hard on IKEA for the circulation. And I don't see that here. I'm not sure it bothers me, but I mentioned it with IKEA that they didn't have any kind of circulation into this project, and they got by with it. I wasn't happy about it, but they got by with it, and it seems that, since they did, we have to sort of let you go by with it too. I mean, we can't force you to integrate with something that isn't there, but maybe a little bit more work there would be nice. Otherwise, the pictures are really nice.
Yeah, I have just two more comments. Andy and I were chatting, and Paul reminded me of something that we had talked about. And the first thing was, I am unsure about the amount of retail on Shell Mound and what staff's thoughts are on that. And that's just something that, we may want to take a look at in terms of not turning the back of the project onto Shell Mound, but the amount of retail that goes there. And the second thing is the bridge. And I know this is blue sky, but there's reasons for it being in north, and also I agree with Commissioner Germain, there's reasons for the south. And is 2 bridges unfeasible? Just a thought. I just wanted to throw those out as taking a look at some of those issues.
Commissioner Lutz, can I just make sure that you understand at this point what my understanding is of the retail presence on Shell Mound? At this point, there is going to be retail presence through signage and possibly display. I don't believe there's going to be a lot of access onto from Shell Mound into the project. I believe that most of the major access, if not all of it, practically will occur down the main street. That's their notion, that's what their focus is, that main street will act as where most people gain access and exit from. I don't think that we're going to eliminate the possibility, but certainly I think that's what the notion and the concept that was presented here tonight, and that's my understanding.
Yeah, and I understand that too. I guess my thought process was maybe softening that hard back on the shell mount and just...
They're talking Craftsman Village, and the site plan is a dumbbell mall. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. There's a big entertainment center that's wide and of concentrated density at the south end, and they're talking hotel at the north end. Now, they don't happen to be fashion department store dumbbells, but that's what the site plan is, with a strolling mall down the middle. And it's very difficult to ask that kind of a shopping center to face the railroad tracks to the east and the vehicular access to the west. So I don't see how you can force them to do much more than they've done. They've paid a little bit of, they've wrapped a couple of liner buildings at the ends of those blocks around to face the street, but I don't see how they could go much further.
We're going to be working on that in the next couple of weeks with them. I think there are some ideas.
I'd like to go back to the bridge one more time. First of all, we have to get an easement agreement from Southern Pacific to go over there, right? Don't we?
It's
a permit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Catapult.
When you say you want it further north, whereabouts are you talking about?
Would be in this area in here.
I know.
Right there where Christy Lupus?
Yeah. It would be a line here because this is where the Chiron landing is that we've reserved. So it's in this area by the hotel.
Where's Park?
Park?
Even though, you want it right there, even though all they really have to do is walk one more block underneath the overpass and go across the existing walkway. It's too far. We really, how much is this going to cost?
Park Avenue aligns with the loading in the back of IKEA, right?
I think so. Yeah, I'm not talking, I just think that this overpass.
Could be 45th. Right at.
No, I don't. I think it's redundant. I don't see a whole lot of people using the one in the marketplace.
Speaking to the microphone.
They want you to turn it toward you. It only goes up front.
Yeah, see, I don't think it's going to be used much because they're certainly not using the one in the marketplace. And why not?
They are using it.
They are? When? When I'm at work in Oakland. They are never using it when I'm at home because I look right at it.
It gets a lot of the times used, particularly at lunchtime and...
During in the evenings.
And between us having access over the railroad track of our new 40th Street Bridge and having this one, we need another one in the middle. People will not walk, huh? I'm sorry. I just think that money could possibly be spent in other places than another overpass. I know this is probably one of your dreams, but I just...
Well, I think that one of the major shortcomings of the community back in the late 80s when the general plan was done was the separation that the railroad created between east and west portions of the community, and to bridge that, there were these pedestrian linkages conceived of. I believe they're important. You're creating a major employment center on the east side of the highway between Pixar and Chiron. You have a tremendous concentration of employment. You've got the retail, entertainment, food uses on the west side. I think it just makes a lot of sense.
Nobody's going to get on the shuttle, right?
One of the things that we need to think through is what the usage patterns and the circulation patterns are going to be the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And I believe that those kinds of linkages are important.
But I also think, based on our discussion in the Park Street Overlay District about the amount of pedestrian traffic we are really trying to promote. And I think that's, I agree with you. I think that that we do have a bifurcation of the city because of that rail.
But the high concentration, the 6,000 employees of the big employers east of the tracks are concentrated almost exactly in the alignment of Temescal Creek, which coincidentally fits well into the site plan of the shopping center. So it seems like you're going to end up there. I mean, I don't know what's, you can push for what you want, but that's...
Where would that end up over on the other side of the railroad track?
On the Sherwin-Williams site.
Yeah.
We could just float it.
Its days are numbered. It's not forever.
Right.
Do we have any other comments? No? Well, I would like to thank Madison Marquette in coming and giving us the courtesy of letting us see your project, and hopefully we've given you some information that will be valuable next month. So, on to other items.